Hello and welcome to Lore Wouts, a roundtable freeform discussion about lore and your favorite media. I'm your host, Joe Perez, one of several lore-focused folks from Blizzard Watch, and I've got my stupendous co-host with me today, Matt Rossi. How are you doing today, Matt?
I am doing things full of anger.
Indeed, he is doing things full of anger.
I'm playing Diablo. I'm playing a lot of Diablo, guys.
Yeah,
it's nothing fancy.
And let's be honest, Diablo is just one of those things where, you know...
When I play it, I play a barbarian. And that's pretty much, you can call it anger, wrath, fury, whatever the hell it is this time. But it's always the same thing. It's just basically just hitting things and getting angrier and angrier and angrier and angrier. That's your character. It's like the barbarian. I just hate everything.
No, that is definitely the whole thing of a barbarian. We're going to answer some questions though. And speaking of barbarians, I think our first one's going to be a Diablo question. But if you at home have questions for this or any of our podcasts, be sure to send those in to podcasts@blizzardwatch.com. Specify the show that it is for in the subject line, as well as any special pronunciation of your name. If you want to hit us up on Discord, you can go ahead and send those into the podcast and Q questions channel. We tend to look there as well. And the same rules apply. Tell us what show it's for and any special pronunciation of your name. The other thing you can do is if you are a Patreon subscriber, and this is a really great thing for us, we appreciate it. And as a way of saying thank you, we go ahead and, have the Patron Q and Podcast questions channel set aside for you. That channel is where we look first. It's extra something. And then you can go ahead and if you don't want to send those to us on Discord or email, and you are a Patreon subscriber, go ahead and send those on Patreon, where Liz or Dan will ensure that they get to us in a timely manner. And also, just if you are listening to us and you are not a Patreon subscriber, we do shill at the end of the show, but I want to just put it at the top of the show as well. Consider joining our Patreon. It does give you early access to all of our content. It gives you an ads-free site experience on our website. It also gives you first billing when we take questions from our listeners or show topics. It also helps us keep the light on and keep all of our writers employed and all of our content created. It's a really good thing. So if you can spare a couple bucks, go for it.
Join us. I happen to be doing the master from Fallout.
That makes sense.
Join us.
All right, well then we're going to go ahead and get started then with our first question, and this one comes from Token BG. Question for Lore Watch: do the people of Sanctuary not know what happened to Prince Aiden, or at least the Haradrim? As I beat D4 finally, I watched Narelle and went, have we not learned our lesson here? Matt, I'm going to let you loose.
Well, Narelle probably has absolutely no idea what happened to Prince Aiden because it happened 600 years ago. Like, it happened in Diablo 2, the beginning of Diablo 2. That's at least 100 years ago. She's probably never heard of it. Also, Aiden was the prince of a very small country on the other side of the world. And Honduras, not a big, powerful nation as nations in Sanctuary go. In fact, it lost a war to Westmarch, which, while Westmarch was the most powerful nation on that side of the world, it was a colony from the most powerful nation on this side, which is now itself gone. It'd be like asking, doesn't this, French guy in the 100 Years' War know who, Geoffrey of Monmouth was? No. Yeah, he would have no idea.
You also have to consider the fact that the devastation that the world has suffered at this point too.
Yeah.
Like you can't exactly just go to your local library and like look this stuff up. And
plus, most people are not literate.
Yes, I mean that's just a sad reality.
Yeah, I mean, granted, this is a video game, but it is a video game intended to echo the feeling of like a pseudo-European fantasy world, and whilst it's made great strides in becoming less just that, I mean, we've got a lot of diversity in Diablo 4 that broadens everything out. The nation in question, Honduras, A, wasn't very powerful. B, was pretty distant from every place you're seeing in this game. Everybody in Diablo 4 that we're meeting so far is on the other side of Sanctuary. It's a different place. C, most people aren't going to know what's going on with their own leadership of their own country, much less what's going on with the dead guy from over 100 years ago from a relative backwater.
Yeah.
You know,
And like the storytellers are, for lack of a better term, mostly gone at this point, right?
yeah. I
Like,
mean, the Deckard Cain's been dead for like what, 50 years?
and not just Deckard Cain, but you're also looking at, like, again, and I keep coming back to this, 90% of the population was gone,
Yeah,
right?
there's like who, if you even knew somebody who was alive at that time, and there are a few, there's actually a couple in game we meet them, the chances of them remembering him specifically, because remember, even if he was wandering around as the Dark Wanderer, he wasn't walking into every room going, I used to be Prince Aiden before I stuck this thing in my head. People didn't know who the Dark Wanderer was. They knew he was like this horrible thing that showed up and everything went bad. So even if there's a story somewhere out there about what happened, it's not going to be a story that contains a lot of details, because all the people who knew the details are dead. All the people that were alive at the time of it are dead. And all the people who are alive after it are dead. Like there's, even, and of the Haradrim who are currently alive, only one of them would have a snowball's chance in hell of knowing any of this.
Yeah.
Like, and he didn't experience any of it. He was not a member of the Haradrim at the time. He probably wasn't even alive. Like, he would never have he never even met Deckard Cain. He never even met Leah. He just no connections. It's not, with Tyrael gone, the amount of people who probably know anything about Aiden's fate is in the single digits. So no, most people have no idea.
And there's another side of your question here of asking if we've learned anything. There's a simple answer here, and that answer is no. We don't. Right? Like, even if there were storytellers around, even if there were the people from the Haradrim still running around all over the place, we generally ignored them. The people of Sanctuary at one point turned on them. Right? Like, they were not widely accepted. You had people like Zoltan Kuhl, who had a pretty less than stellar reputation, we'll say.
The few people I knew about him were the people who went in and ripped his body into little pieces and took all his blood and stuck it in a jar, because all his body parts and his blood could be reassembled.
And what do you think they told everybody else about their time in, talking to the ghost of Zoltan Kuhl or the person of Zoltan Kuhl? I can't imagine it was fantastic.
I mean, and let's put it this way. It also depends on who you mean by we.
Mm-hmm.
We, the players of the game, we've learned quite a bit. We know the lore of the stories. We know this is a bad idea. If anything, a lot of the storytelling in Diablo 4 and Diablo 3 before it, and even Diablo 2 to some extent, depends on the fact that we, the audience, we, the players, do know it's bad. We know it's a bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
But the people in it keep doing it, A, because they haven't learned anything, and B, because the information is not even available for them to have learned it, and C, they don't see any other option. The entirety of Diablo 4 is about how they know this soul stone it's a flawed instrument. It is, even if it was a perfect soul stone made exactly for Mephisto, it would not be an end goal. This thing is not a silver bullet. It's not going to get you to victory. It's kicking the can down the road.
Mm-hmm.
It's buying time. So yeah, they kind of know that this is a bad idea. They know what Aiden did. They know what happened to Albrecht before him. They know that the soul stones, I mean, hell, we know about Tal Rasha. Most people don't know about Tal Rasha. What happened to Tal Rasha, or who Tal Rasha even was, is completely, it's not even close to public knowledge.
No, it's lost to time, right? Like,
yeah,
and that's a lot of stuff with Diablo 2, is a lot of stuff just gets lost to time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened here. We've gone through so much in the time between those games that, yeah, it's practically like every generation has to almost relearn this. And that's one of the big tragedies in our own history, is that generations had to keep relearning the same stuff because there was no way to publicly disseminate the knowledge. I don't see a lot of printing presses in Diablo. And even if there were, the trade networks don't exist because so many people have died. It's kind of like, I really keep using the Black Death as a metaphor, because in a way it really does feel like that Black Death world where you went from a completely feudalistic society where everybody was born into a role and you stayed in it. And then suddenly there weren't enough people to do the work because so many of them had died. And in our history, a lot of governmental structures collapsed and then had to be basically rebuilt. But on Sanctuary, whole nations just fell apart because it was so much worse. This is, I've said it before, and I know Joe said it before. You are playing in like a Fallout game.
Yeah.
When you play Diablo 4, you are playing in a post-apocalyptic society that has even lost the minimal stuff that it had managed to learn over the past few hundred years. Like, look at the Church of Light, not Cathedral of Light that gets created here. It's an exact replica of something that existed well over 1,000 years before, but nobody here knows that. The only person who might know that is the angel who did it. He's not telling anybody.
And there's more to that too, right? Like, I mean, let's look at some of the highlights of Diablo 4's stellar world building, because I think this is stuff that often gets overlooked when talking about the game. The Church of Light, right? Who controls the knowledge in the Church of Light when we first meet them? It's either Parva, who's in charge of everything, and is Prava, excuse me.
No, it's just, Parva is like a disease.
Yeah. I mean, similar here, I guess. But that's
the case could be made.
Yeah. Who's not exactly incentivized to give people all the knowledge that she has. You have an angel who can't get back to heaven, is driven by a vendetta, and isn't exactly mentally sound, who doesn't tell her everything. And there's really no incentive for him to tell everybody everything. And that just keeps cascading down. So the lowest members of the church, the parishioners, know only what they're told and can only know what they're told. So they know precious little. Take a look at Nerel and Nerel's mother. What are they? They are scholars. They are scholars who are traveling the world trying to find lost tomes, lost knowledge, things that have survived the fall of humanity, things that have survived the almost complete destruction of Sanctuary. Again, 90% of life gone. And the stuff they find, they don't necessarily understand the context of. If they did, do you really think that Nerel's mother would have abandoned her child and given herself completely over to Lilith? I mean, maybe, but it didn't seem like that was the type of relationship they had. But again, she didn't know what she was reading. She didn't know what she was doing. She didn't have the context for it. But then when it happened, now Nerel has the context for it. And until Nerel dies.
Until Nerel dies, if Nerel doesn't have a chance to pass that along, like right now, of the people in the world, some people knew Lilith was returning, but not many. And most people, when Lilith returned, they just kind of rolled with it because Lilith, A, is a very powerful demon, and B, was promising them something that nobody else was.
Yeah, a fighting chance.
Yeah, and it's weird to think of it this way. And I think, Joe, I think you said this once. It's not even just that people don't know. It's that they don't even know what there is to know.
Yeah.
Like the whole thing of like when you go to Nehantu, all that stuff, most people in Sanctuary have no idea about it.
Yeah, most people in Sanctuary don't know Nehantu exists anymore, right? Like, and I think we've both said this, and I'm not just going to take sole credit for it, but it's really hard to understand you're missing something when you don't know what you're missing. And that's really what the problem with the world is, with the everything that's happened since Diablo 3 to now has basically cut humanity off from each other, which means it's cut the information flow off, which means everybody cares more about survival than they do generally ancient stories. That's just sort of the way of the world now. And when they do get to those ancient stories, they don't understand the full context of it, and they don't understand that they're incomplete. So it's really easy for somebody like Lilith to come in, tell them exactly what they want to hear, which in a lot of cases is, hey, it really kind of bites that you keep getting eaten by demons, right? What if you had a chance to fight back with a bunch more power? Or what if you were able to fight back against the prime evils? Oh, those angels forsake you? Oh, you know that an angel, because the story has cascaded down that an angel caused the destruction of the world. You want to fight against them? What if I gave you that power? All you got to do is follow me. It's really easy for somebody to fall for that when they don't understand who Lilith is. Somebody who up until this point wasn't in existence, right? Like it's a weird, Diablo 4 is a weird post-apocalyptic setting in that regard. And I think it really is well documented and shown inside of the game. And the people that know more than they do are people like the spirit dancers or the spirit mancers or spiritborn. I was going to get there eventually, because they talk with entities that have knowledge that transcends, I guess, reality would be the best way to put it. And even then, they only know what they treat with or are told, right? Like there's a limit to it. I heard Matt was going to say something, so I'll stop.
I was like, doing like a preach brother type thing. Because, yes, absolutely. It's not just that they don't know, it's that they don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
They don't know there is anything else to know. And that's the truth, whether it's in, a fantasy video game or in life. There are a lot of people whose day-to-day is all that is their day-to-day. And they don't have time to be aware of higher matters. It's not that those things aren't important. It's that to somebody who is like, if I step outside without my axe and my dogs, I might get killed by this flying monster.
Yeah, go try to teach
that in someone,
I was gonna say, go try to teach math to somebody who's starving, right? Like, what do they care more about, calculus or whether their next meal is coming from?
Yeah, I mean, there's a really good example of somebody who was like, "What's calculus even good for the 95% of the people who learn it?" And the teacher who's teaching says, "It's nothing. You will never use this. You will literally never use calculus, unless you start like firing rockets off or something." And they're like, "Then why are we learning it?" It goes, "Because if you were in a sport, do you have to work out? Do they have weight days? Like you football players, do you have weight days, like when you lift weights?" And they're like, "Yeah." He goes, "When are you going to lift weights during the game?" They're like, "We're not." He goes, "Yes, but what is weightlifting for then? Why are you doing it?" It's like, to get stronger. He goes, "Yes, calculus is like that for your brain." Now imagine if you stop to work out, you're going to get eaten by a grue. Are you going to stop to work out? No, because if you're dead, it doesn't matter how smart you are. It's very much like that. These people they have day-to-day problems that they have to deal with. It's like all the problems of a subsistence economy where you have to grow all your own food, or just about. Like everything you have to either get and make yourself, or you have to trade for it directly. Like the idea of coinage is even somewhat antiquated. Like we use it in the game because it's, otherwise your character's gonna have no means to get anything. But it could just as easily be a pure-on trade economy where you just bring in stuff like, "I got some chickens. What do you got? Oh, you got some milk. Yeah, I'll give you these chickens for the milk." That kind of thing you no longer have time for. Is the sun orbiting the earth, or is the earth orbiting the sun? You don't care. And in Sanctuary, you really don't care, because in addition to all that, my family might starve thing is the goat people might come and murder us, or a gigantic fall of blood may hit the land and now we have to all run away, or vampires will eat us.
Or this tribe of cannibals might come out of nowhere and decide that we are on the menu tonight.
Exactly. Like there's stuff that could kill you everywhere. So yeah, I think it is fascinating to think about the fact that the average person on Sanctuary has no idea of how any of this got started. Like they to them, it's just, it happened. And if you go back far enough, there's enough scholarship left that we can go back far enough to like the origin of current nations. And then it gets even weirder, because you realize nobody remembers the Sin War. Like it's actually been erased from existence. Nobody remembers it.
Mm-hmm.
And the entirety, we meet Akarat in this game, and when we meet him, he tells us that we don't know if he's Akarat or not, and neither does he. Like, I think it's actually kind of becoming a subtext of the game at this point, really, that Sanctuary is a house of cards, that nobody really knows what's happening.
Which harkens back to the creation of Sanctuary, let's be honest, right? Like, Sanctuary exists because it was believed into existence with the World Stone. And how it's sustaining itself with the World Stone gone, and those that are the ones that dreamed it into existence pretty much gone, is really a fascinating question. And again, like you said, there's a whole subtext to it, where is reality? I mean, look at the swamps. Look at when we talk about the witches. Look when we talk about the tree. Look when we talk about like the extra dimensional spaces that we can get to. All of that, which are key parts of like the end game and the last chapters that we've experienced.
Heck, the current season is all about dealing with the witches again.
Yeah, I mean,
they very much they're the ones that at one point they're like, if this happens, it won't just affect Sanctuary, it'll affect the swamps. And you're like, Sanctuary, the swamp is part of Sanctuary, and they go, "Oh, is it?"
Because then again, your perception of reality is challenged here.
Yeah, and when you go into Hawazar, it's even worse. Not Hawazar. Nahantu even is also has a slightly different mindset than Hawazar, but it too seems to have a mindset of we are separate from everything else, and at the same time part of everything else. And that's like when you go through the storyline of Vessel of Hatred, one of the things that really stands out is that they have their entire different cosmology. And the thing is you can't dismiss it because it works. Like they can do the stuff they say they can do. They can interact with the spirits they say they can interact with. And those spirits it can interact with, fight, and even be then beat or be defeated by the forces of hell. Like there's a lot of broadening to what's really happening in Nahantu. And I think that is a big subtext of this entire game. What you know about the game might be real, but it doesn't mean it's complete. Like just because you know these things doesn't mean other things aren't out there.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that what somebody else believes is reality is incorrect.
Yeah, you can both. In fact, you might both be right. And that's kind of terrifying when you have these monster things lurking in these, the dark. The average farmer doesn't want to know about them.
Mm-hmm.
He just certainly doesn't want to know about some prince from some country he never heard of over like 150 or something years ago. I don't care what happened to that guy. Well, you see that it's because of that guy that this is all happening. Well, F that guy then. That if you stop to explain it to them, they just get angry at him, if they even knew. So yeah, have we learned anything? No. We've managed to forget everything several times.
And it will happen again. All right, but I think that hopefully answers your question. We're going to move on to the next one, which is from Stalrim, a Dwarf Frost Death Knight on Dalaran. Quick question. I noticed today that humans in game have the option to have pointy ears. I'm pretty sure it's a new option. Do you think this has anything to do with the Arathi? And if not, what lore implications do you think it has? 100% has to do with the Arathi.
Yep.
Absolutely. I don't know. I think they talked about it in one of I think it was when the first content release or the first patch that happened after the game release, if I'm not mistaken. But it was pretty quiet because there were so many other things that were going on that it was really, really easy to miss. It's extra customization, and it lets you sort of slot into that role with all the armors that you get from it. You can be an Arathi adventurer that is joining up to fight the good fight that is coming out of the cave and bringing your light to other places. As far as what lore implications it has, I don't really know that it has much of any aside from that it's a customization aligned with the Alliance, which would make sense because they're elf humans. And let Matt give his 2 cents there.
I mean, I think it's very much everything you just said. I also think it's letting you, if you choose to, you can now play a half elf.
Mm-hmm.
We've got half elves in the game, but we've seen one of them very, very often, and we've seen somebody in the guise of one. Caligos likes to dress up in half elf cosplay. His visage is a half elf.
And with all the stuff that's happening with the Kirin Tor, he's back and present. So there you go.
Yeah, but also there's Arator, who we have met briefly. He's the son of Turalian and Ilaria. He usually uses an elf model, but now if they want to bring him back and they want to give him a better model, they can. They can make him a half elf,
which I kind of hope they do.
Yeah, that would be great. And for that matter, if we ever get to meet Reese's kids, they're half elves too.
Yeah, which we've seen them when they were younger briefly, and we've never seen them since, right?
And Sylvanas is 17 children. No, I'm kidding.
Now that'll be after she finds Nathanos and the maw.
Yes. Half elf, half dead babies. She just shows up, and Nathanos is pushing a pram behind her. He's got a papoose on with one of the kids in it, and they're like, "What happened?" I was like, "It's been a long story. It's a long story." Why is he carrying Nathanos? Why are you? I am the Blade Caller, you imbecile.
There are so many children. There are so many jokes I can make, and none of them are relevant for a PG-13 rating. So we're going to move on.
Yeah. But in all sincerity, it just gives you the option to do that. Half elves, we know they exist in World of Warcraft. We know that there are people, and we know that they're basically just like, as far as we can tell, we don't know anything about their lifespans or anything like that. We don't know, do they live longer? We don't know. Do they have, elven like anything? We don't know. We know that they have this.
To be fair, we kind of do though, right? Because we know that Arator has been pretty long lived at this point.
Yeah, but we don't know if that means he's going to live as long as an elf, or if he's just going to live like 2 human lifetimes.
True, that's fair, but
Yeah.
we do know that they have a at least a longer than human lifespan at this point, maybe.
Well, it seems that they do.
Yeah.
It's just in terms of Arator at this point should be fairly old. Like he'd be a 60 or 70-year-old guy.
And as far as like lore implications, the thing that I hope it means when we start getting customization like this is we're going to have more interaction with the Arathi beyond what we're doing right now. Like in the future, we're going to go to the Arathi Empire. We're going to meet the Emperor. We're going to see their society. Whether that's good or bad, we'll find out. And maybe that happens in Midnight. Maybe that's part of that whole storyline. Where,
and for that matter, it really. Oh no, I won't. I'm.
go ahead.
Well, you go on some more. I want them to finally just allow people to like be in one of the factions based on wanting to be in one of the factions.
Yeah.
It's one of the things I've been thinking about for a long time. There could be humans who join the Horde. Maybe not like an entire nation of humans, but imagine if like a group of like, nationless pirates keep running into and doing stuff for Horde people. Eventually they could be like, look, can we just hang out here? I mean, this is more to our taste, quite frankly. We like, drinking ridiculous amounts of grog and getting into bar fights with orcs. That's our deal. So what do you say? And you could have like orcs who decide they want to join the Alliance. Like we've always wanted to see Stormwind and its beautiful spires. And you're like, this guy wants to study our architecture. Should we let him? Yeah, why not? Like we've seen that kind of to a degree that the Horde and the Alliance are getting, I wouldn't say friendlier, but they're less the barriers are at the drop of a hat.
Yeah, the barriers are certainly lower than they ever have before, especially now that we have larger things to focus on. And Matt and I have talked about this in the past, and we're definitely on the same page with that. We're kind of over the whole Horde versus Alliance thing being the central point of a story. It's boring. I mean, it's been done. We did it for, 20 plus years at this point.
I'm going to use a metaphor here. I think it's kind of like when Star Trek decided that the Klingons and the Federation were not exactly best friends, but they had a treaty and they had an alliance and they did stuff cross lines.
Yeah.
Like they had, like Riker at one point went and served on a Klingon ship. And I've been watching a lot of Star Trek because I'll be up front. My wife's been very sick recently. And so she's been watching a lot of Star Trek The Next Generation. So I've been watching a lot of it. And one thing you forget is that, Jonathan Frakes is a big MFer.
Mm-hmm.
Dude is tall. He's freaking big. The second is that Riker was absolutely unafraid to throw his weight around. Like, he got into fights with Klingons. He picked people up to threaten them. He lifted a guy off the ground and just shoved him up against the wall and said, do what I want or I will hurt you. Like, if you actually watch the show, Riker is dangerous. He doesn't show it a lot of the time, but this is a guy who will straight up say, okay, that's my former captain over there. I'll kill you. And I think one of the things I keep thinking about in WoW is that you could have a lot more of cross-faction like relationships that don't have to be all friendly.
And to be fair, there are some of that already. Like there's the Goblin that serves in SI7, right? Like
there's Bolvar and oh bloody hell, Sorfang the Younger.
Mm-hmm.
Like the two of them, they weren't. I don't know. It's almost like buddy cops. They didn't they always like each other, but there was a respect there. And I would like, one of the things I keep thinking I would love to see them do is putting in an ambassador program where instead of, my character has fled the Alliance, you just literally say, okay, I'm going to be over doing Horde stuff for a while as a member of the Alliance who is doing Horde stuff. The point would be you'd be an ambassador of the Alliance and you'd be doing that Horde stuff in the interest of both factions getting along.
It reminds me a lot of what we were talking about or at least what we learned in the Sylvanas book. When you start going through her history and her family's history, that was not uncommon back then either. Humans going to elven diplomats and elven diplomats going to like human or other societies, right? Like, so you just expand that to be Horde and Alliance, and you expand that to be all of the races. Maybe the gnomes want to figure out why Tauren like living the way they do, or maybe there's a Tauren that's real curious about what it's like to build a flying head. Like you can have like these things that are not everything blends into one faction, but you can have interesting storytelling. And I think that's where I would like to see some of that go, where it's more like, okay, well, relationships are complicated. That's fine. We can deal with that. But you can have like those cool moments of, hey, this Tauren and this human fell in love, or
we have a character like Garona,
yeah,
who is canonically half orc and half Draenei.
yes.
And I mean, wouldn't it be cool if your orc could have a little bit less orc-like features that were like something else?
Or if my Draenei could have orc skin.
Yeah, or your Draenei could be like, imagine having an orc character with Draenei feet.
Oh my god, actual feet instead of hooves on my Draenei.
Yeah,
I could wear
the other way around. Yeah,
I could wear boots.
There's a lot of possibilities here, and I think it's not something that they should just throw around pell-mell willy-nilly. But if they do it for the purposes of telling story, like one of the things I really liked so far in The War Within is how like the characters can work together regardless of affiliation, but also that they work with their factions. And sometimes there's like, you have to straighten this out. Like Turalian, and I forget the orc lady, I'm sorry, I think it's Thrall's sort of sister. Like, she's not Thrall's sister, but she's the head of the Maghar, and she's kind of like the female Thrall from a different dimension sort of thing. I think that's what it is.
Gaiara.
Yeah, Gaiara. Yeah.
That's it. I knew it was in there somewhere, yeah.
But her and Turalian are going back and forth. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, is it like, and I think somebody even says, I'm so sorry that you have to be the one in the middle of this name. And you're like, yeah, it's fine. It's fine. I am fine with there being antagonism. I'm fine with there being like,
there can be antagonism without full out war though. That's the thing. Yeah. And I think that those are more interesting stories.
Well, plus I just think it's possible to have, like, you could even have factions at full out war if you really wanted to. And still, there's this like old tailor, like this old orc tailor, in the trade town, who is there, and he's constantly complaining. But then an idealistic young elf doctor shows up, and the orc and the elf basically start a romance. And yes, I'm talking about Garrick from Deep Space Nine and Julian. But you know what I mean? Like, even when there's antagonism between their peoples, they can still talk and get along, and in time, that informs the relationship between their peoples. So I'm going to bring this back because I think Matt's one of the few people that will actually remember this movie. But when I was a kid, one of my favorite sci-fi movies was Enemy Mine. Yeah. And I knew you were going there. Lewis, just brilliant. Yeah, Enemy Mine was one of those brilliant movies that I watched as a kid, and it was like this really important display of how two completely different peoples, like in this case a human and I cannot remember what the alien race's name was, but they're at war with each other, and they wind up crash landed on a planet together, and the only way they can survive is by working together. And it goes beyond that, where it shows that over time that hatred strips away, where they start understanding each other's languages, they start learning the languages of each other, they become dependent on each other, and it's such an interesting, like, just development of character born out of that. And again, you can have antagonism, because there is plenty of antagonism between the two of them until they get to common ground. But you can have antagonism without full out war or full out violence. And even if you do have stories that have an element of like violence or brutality to them, it makes it a little more poignant than, it's just another war. And that's kind of where I feel like Warcraft got for a bit, was like, let's just have war. War is in the name of it. We're going to go back to war. And it's like, that gets boring after a while, at least to me. And I like this idea of having that more nuanced relationship. Like maybe, if we go and visit the Arathi, maybe members of the Horde send people to observe the culture there. I mean, or maybe they're not allowed to because of xenophobia, and maybe it becomes a central point of it. Like, you have all these interesting things that you can do, and I'm hoping that letting people be characters of this customization, or with these customizations, breeds sort of that RP element of, yes, I'm from this faction and I want to observe this, and I think that's more interesting. And maybe it informs other storytelling that they do later on, where, like, again, Matt talked about, maybe we get to see half-elves. Let's talk about how half-elves fit into society. Let's talk about how, they're either their elves or their human lineages, how they interact. Or maybe it's half troll,
half elf, or half
I was
troll,
just
half
gonna
human.
say half troll, half elf. We have the like weird vampire-y guys
Those
who
are
are
orc trolls if I've ever seen them.
they to me they look like they make me feel like troll elf.
They're night trolls. They're what I think of, like, no joke. And I'm sorry to go on a wild tangent here, but or maybe I'm not. Maybe you guys will enjoy this. When I saw them, the first thing that came out of my mind when I saw them was, oh, that to me is what a night troll was supposed to look like.
Yeah, or at least something related to them. It's kind of like if you see a dinosaur and someone's like, "Wow, that dinosaur is just like this, like an ancestor of this dinosaur." You're like, no, it's like a cousin of the ancestor of this. That's kind of how I felt when I saw. Well, actually, the very first thing I thought, whenever someone says night trolls, I hear night beat in my head because of that game. Remember Night Trap, where you like Dana Plato?
Wow, yeah.
Every time someone says night troll, I'm like night troll. But also, remember the night troll that we saw at the Zandalari?
Yeah, the last, and I'm air quoting, night troll.
Well, yeah, definitely the last one anyone knows about. I keep thinking it would be great if the next time you go there, the model for that race is somehow applied to that troll, so it doesn't really look like a troll anymore. Like, I think that would be cool.
Yeah, like they have an opportunity to embrace adaptive radiation here, which I think is really interesting, because you could literally have trolls be this the origin point of like so many different species, and you could do some really cool stuff. And like, sorry, I'm nerding out over the idea of this, because I like divergent evolution a lot. I think it's a really fascinating science.
Well, plus the concept of adaptive radiation, one of the great things about it is that it allows you to have like all the different finches, except with trolls or with elves or whatever.
Exactly.
I was thinking about it in terms of like what we saw in the last expansion, where you got all the different elf people coming together. Imagine if the causal relationship between night trolls and night elves was proven, and then suddenly you got trolls coming around, and the trolls are setting up on that island, and so the troll loas are showing up as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got like elves talking to the Loa like they're ancients, and trolls talking to the ancients like they're Loa, and the Loa and the ancients are basically just, I mean, they're not all friendly with each other, but they are like, like they have a kind of like a Seelie and Unseelie court kind of thing going on. Like there's a lot of room for stuff to like get more interesting and complex in World of Warcraft. I know a lot of it won't happen because this is a game before it's a story, and I'm not kidding myself, but I do think that you can still make it more complicated and interesting and fun without sacrificing
and there's
the core of it.
And there's an opportunity for them to take that storytelling into the books and take some of the stuff that they show in game and evolve the story through there, right? Like they can evolve the story further in books again. And I think that would be fine here too. They can be more nuanced there that they can't be in. But
didn't we have like a goblin and a goblin and a gnome who were in love in one of the books? I think, wouldn't you imagine like if a troll, if you just want to stay even just in your faction for it, if a troll and a goblin fall in love, there's some logistics to work out here.
Yeah, what was it? It was Grizzak and I want to say Saffronetta? Safi?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's it. I mean, they pop up again in
they're in game.
Azeroth.
Yeah, they're in game.
Yeah.
They exist. But I mean, like you could do stuff like that and have those nuanced stuff and have that flow over into the game. I mean, they did that with why can't I remember the pirate's name? Flynn. And the guy from SI7, like that stuff wasn't a book. It didn't exist in the game, and now it does exist in the game.
Oh yeah, I know Matthias Shaw and Flynn.
Thank you,
Flynn Fairwind.
Yeah, like that makes sense to me, and it makes a very interesting story. And then when you see it, it's like, oh, okay, yeah. I like nuance.
It doesn't necessarily have to be in the game because it doesn't necessarily come up. It's like you don't know Flynn well enough to know about his dating life. But in the book, if you want to go read it, here it is. And if you don't have to. And I think that could be true for a lot of things. I like there's a little there's actually a little recognition in the game now that Flynn and Matthias are at least a thing. They don't go around talking about it very much, but you're aware that it is a thing. But doesn't necessarily have to be a quest about it. And I think that's kind of cool. What I'm really trying to say is that I think that there's this little change where they made the elf ears for human figures. I think that's great. I also think it could really be the first of more. I think there's going to be a lot of limits on it. We're not going to suddenly get goblins with Volpera ears. Not that we shouldn't. I'm certainly okay if you want to. If you think your Volpera character is half goblin, I support you. But I also don't think we necessarily need to have assets created for it right away. But I do think it would be nice if they did continue to do this. We know we're getting playable. I mean, I think we already have them. Playable. I don't want to say demons, but the Eridar.
Yeah,
you can be an Eridar.
You can be an Eridar. I think this ties in with another question from our friend Razorbug. So I want to I want to jump to that and ask that so that we can talk about this a little bit more. And from Razorbug, I'm a little behind on the curve, so I've only just run into Renzik, the Goblin operative, which we were talking about before, that working for SI7. Okay, that makes sense. He's on the take. The money's good. SI7 is Black Ops. They've been the rules to get what they need to be done. But that got me thinking, does this pave the way for narratives of other groups, troll tribes, elves with differing philosophy or religious beliefs, sea mages, goblin cartels, Tauren tribal factions, etc., switching sides to further their causes and or just for the money? Could this lead to Blizzard homogenizing the races classes with faction races as primary, but each faction having the other as allied race, or perhaps more interestingly, a loose collection of NPCs or players who identify as mercenaries and operate for their own motivation afforded by the current alliance horde truce? So that's kind of what we're talking about, is like, they could, this, everything that you're saying and everything that we're talking about before, this could pave the way for a lot of that stuff. Now, way long ago, and I think it was years at this point, Anne was still with us, I brought up the idea of a third faction, of having a neutral faction. And I don't know that that's necessary anymore. If the truce holds, you can literally just have whatever story you want without having to be a third faction that like completely walks away from the alliance or the horde. You can have these sort of subdivisions that have always been there. Let's be honest.
Yeah. I mean, look at the Wrath of the Lich King for a moment. I don't care what faction you were in. At some point, you took quests from somebody who was a different race that isn't in your faction. Like if you were the Argent Crusade, the whole point was there were these other groups like the Cenarian Circle and the Argent Crusade where you'd go and there could be there could be druids, like a Tauren druid could be giving you quests in Silithus. Like an orc is giving you quests at the Argent Crusade base in Zoldrak. A night elf is giving the horde quests at the foot of Ice Crown Citadel. That kind of thing could be done more, is all we're saying. We're not saying add a whole new thing. We're saying take the thing you've already did and just expand it. Just actually you get to a place, the only person of any real power or influence in the area is like an orc sergeant who's holding the line to keep like Monster of the Week from getting out. And you're an alliance person and you just help him. It doesn't care. We don't care what faction you're in. You're alive, and that thing is a destroyer from the void that eats reality. I'm going to stop it because that's what I do.
It reminds me of that.
Matter.
It reminds me of that video or the cinematic from Miss Pandaria, where the orc and the human are fighting, and then they get both their butts whooped by a panda, and then they just look at each other and go, "Okay, well, I guess we're fighting together now," and then just go. Like, you can have
the one guy offers the weapon,
the stick. Here's a pointy stick.
I got this here. Unfortunately, they were fighting Chen, so it didn't really work. But still, it was a nice moment. Yeah. But
I mean, like, I like more nuanced and interesting storytelling, and I think they have this big opportunity for it, even with the Goblin cartels. Like we talked about this when we did our Goblin cartel episode. There are cartels that the other goblins just don't like. There are goblins that don't associate with any of the cartels. There are goblins that only associate with certain organizations that also technically happen to associate with the cartels, like the trade league, and things like that. Like, you can have all of these subdivisions that create a very interesting and complex society, right? We even see this inside of humans society as early as vanilla WoW. When you talk about, you have your royalty, you have your nobles, you have the members of the actual military that serve the nobles, and then you have all the farmers, and you have the tradesmen and the conscripted people that wind up getting drafted into war that just are farmers or peasants. And you get to see when you first get to the dead mines how that creates an imbalance or a volatile nature to their society. But the first time you see dead mines, it sort of shakes that foundation, right? Like it's like, oh, the human civilization, the human kingdoms are not what I thought they were necessarily, and there's a darker side to it. It is way more complex.
There's corruption, there's greed, there's actual goblins working here.
Yeah.
So even though the goblins are, have been antagonists, they still took a contract with the Alliance, and the Alliance is like almost using slave labor. There's a lot. The fact that the thing about the Deadmines and the Defias Brotherhood is that it gave you a side of human society where you could be like, oh, the bad guys really have a point. Maybe they're not so bad. Maybe that Van Cleef and his daughter. It was Edwin and Vanessa, right?
Vanessa.
I can't remember Vanessa. Why am I pronouncing Vanessa Vanessa? Jesus,
no idea.
But there's that they had a point. It's not necessarily that their methods weren't always the right way to go, and you could say, look, I have to stop you because you're going to kill a whole lot of people. Yeah, but they weren't wrong. Edmund Van Cleef was very justified in being enraged that they just decided not to pay them, that they did all that work for nothing, and then they were just going to so bad, too bad, so sad sort of thing. And it's like, no, I'm going to sail a giant warship up and blow your city up then. And, obviously there's a lot of people living in Stormwind who would have died from that, so we had to stop him, but he's not wrong. And Vanessa isn't wrong. Her goals are...
Well, because think about it, from her side, her dad was just trying to, secure their life and secure the life of his workers and the money that they were owed. And then an assassination team was sent to kill her father. So of course she's going to fight. Of course she's going to look at this and be like, Stormwind sent assassins at my dad and killed him. And yeah, like that's going to color that as well. Like it becomes way more complicated, way more nuanced. And like, again, I'm saying that a lot, but it's one of the things that I like about Warcraft over the years is that even way back, even in the days of Vanilla WoW, you had just so much, I don't want to say like subtext, but I don't really know another way to say it. The subtext was there for just things being more complicated, more diverse, and just it wasn't as black and white as everything else made it up to be at that point.
Yeah. Like another good example is if you were playing the orc story from the beginning, there's orcs are doing something against orcs. Like, who are these guys? And you find out that there's this weird corrupted cult that Thrall knows about, but hasn't done anything about. And you confront him and he's like, look, we can't just do so. If we just do that, we're just going to get these guys. We're not going to get the ringleaders. We're not going to get the people behind them. But it turns into a murky quagmire where you're constantly chasing after the Argus Wake. Who are they? What do they want? And I remember when I played through that, I was playing a Tauren, and I remember thinking to myself, this is a really almost a noir / cultist story. This is like something you'd see in Weird Tales, except I'm a talking cow, which I mean wouldn't be out of place in Weird Tales, I guess. But there aren't that many stories with like talking cows in Weird Tales. But my point's valid. Like this story it's one about systematic corruption. It's not about the moo-ha-ha-ha villainy corruption. It's people making deals with devils and demons for their own gain. And it's very complex. And it doesn't paint the orcs in a purely sympathetic light. It doesn't destroy them and make them all evil either. It just says, look, for all that Warcraft as a story has been moving away from orc bad, there is a reason that the other side can say orc bad and get away with it. Because these guys, and it's the fact that, like, imagine beloved Magni Bronzebeard, who was beloved in Vanilla WoW, turned up almost getting his own daughter killed because he was so bigoted against her. And that's wild that you got that in vanilla World of Warcraft.
But not against her, though. That's the thing. Like, against the Dark Iron, he didn't want to consider that maybe there was more to the Dark Iron.
Oh, no, but I meant also the fact sexism about him.
Oh, yeah, that's
100%. But you're right. He's absolutely right. There's also the fact that the Dark Iron, for all that they did a lot of bad stuff, but they were being basically not, I don't know, what do you call it when like a big gigantic pillar of flame says, I will kill you if you don't serve me?
I mean, that's slavery.
Yeah, they were enslaved. Yeah.
Straight up, they were enslaved by Ragnaros.
So there's a lot of nuance in just vanilla World of Warcraft. You know, the elves have a point about their hostilities towards the Horde, but they're also being incredibly dogmatic. And the Horde are like, look, we need to get this lumber from somewhere. We're settled in a freaking desert. We can't farm it. We can't do anything there. And the Alliance is constantly like, we don't care. And you see that even in books.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we don't care. We don't care that you're starving to death. It's like, how long is the Horde going to take that? It doesn't matter if what they do is wrong. They can't just not eat.
It's like the Hunger Games, right? Like you're going to see the people of the capital city like eating to excess.
I know nothing about the Hunger Games. This is not
that's fine. But you can see like these people that are like living this life of luxury, eating everything to excess, causing themselves to purge themselves, then eating more because they can, and then everybody in the outskirts is begging for enough to live and survive. Like you can only take that so much before there's an uprising or before there's something has to be done. And
yeah, someone's going to come along and promise them
it's going to come to a head.
All we have to do is X, and you'll get to eat again, and they're going to go for X. It is a thing. So I feel like in a way the breaking down of strict faction lines, like this has also been talked about here, like the question about could this lead to this and that and this, and I think at least narratively it already has. Like narratively speaking, we already see signs of that. Will we see like actual characters getting to do that? I don't know. I think that World of Warcraft makes moves when it thinks it's best for the story it's about to tell, and not necessarily if players want it. And that there's good sides and bad sides to that. I mean, we're getting player housing in the next expansion, but we're getting it because they feel like it works well with the story. I guess technically it might be at the end of this expansion.
It depends. It depends on how development goes. But yeah, it's a possibility that we could get it as soon as the end of this expansion. Yeah.
But either way, a lot of stuff happens because it serves the story they want to tell, or helps them tell the story they want to tell in the new expansion.
Mm.
Right now, we don't know anything about where Midnight's going to take us.
Nope.
I mean, we know what it's about, like to a degree. We have like certain understanding of what it's about, but we don't know where we're going to go. Like, are we going to go deeper into the world? I feel like if we went deeper into the world, it would just be the War Within 2. I don't think that that's what they want to do. But does that mean we're going to see the Arathi? Are we going to like the actual place, the Avaloran that we've been reading about? Mm-hmm. Is Avaloran actually a place we currently are, or is that not the case? I mean,
I still think it is.
I think it might be a part of it, but I think it's like, if you look at the British Isles as a part of Europe, you can say when you're in England that you're in Europe, but you still haven't been to mainland Europe. In much the same way, I feel like this is a part of Avaloran, but it is its own thing as well, and we have not been to the main continent yet. And I think that Avaloran is where the Arathi ended up, for that matter.
Oh, maybe, but I mean, like we can talk about this at another point because we're running out of time.
Yeah, another expansion, another podcast. But yeah, I think that there's a lot of room for nuanced and varied origins and storytelling and roles people could play and stuff you could do. I do absolutely think that's the case, and I would love if they did an expansion where Horde and Alliance didn't have to have wildly disparate stories, but to have their own unique stories. There could be unique Horde quests and unique Alliance quests, but Horde could go play the unique Alliance quests, and Alliance could go play the unique Horde quests. You could let people go back and forth. If you come, like I said before, if you come to a place and there's a giant hole in reality and a weird void monster's coming out to eat everybody around, does it matter that there's an orc telling you that this needs to be stopped? You're not going to disagree with him. It's not like, well, if you're saying so, he must be great. He's literally eating babies over there. Yeah, you're right. We have to stop it. So yeah, I think that there's totally room for that, and I think that it would be a great change.
Yeah. But I think that's going to do it for now. We are currently at time. So I do want to thank you for joining us on this journey and remind you that Blizzard Watch is made possible due to the generous contributions at patreon.com/BlizzardWatch. Your continued support means that this podcast site and community is able to thrive and grow. Blizzard Watch supporters enjoy exclusive benefits like early access to the podcast, better chance at having your questions answered on our podcast, or the Q and an ad-free site experience. Again, if you have questions for this or any of our podcasts, be sure to send those into podcast@blizzardwatch.com. Specify the show that it is for in the subject line, as well as any special pronunciation of your name. If you want to hit us up on Discord, we have 2 channels set aside. One, which is just the Q and Podcast Questions channel. Same rules apply there as they do for email. And if you are a Patreon subscriber, as an extra way of saying thank you for helping us keep the lights on, we have the Patreon Q and Podcast Questions channel, where we tend to look there first for your questions and episode suggestions. But with that, folks, I think that's going to do it. And we'll see you next week.
Zug zug.